Magnolia Street sidewalk. Loretta May Jackson is standing in front of nearly 30 homeless veterans lined along the curb, sitting and lying on flattened cardboard, coats worn thin, boots still on, eyes heavy with hunger and pride. In her hands, just one small grocery bag, one chicken, 2 cans of beans, a sack of rice, and $18 left for medicine she already skipped once. That food is supposed to last her an entire week. People walk past like the men don't exist. A woman pulls her coat tighter and crosses the street. No one stops. Loretta May should keep walking. She should go home. Instead, she looks at those veterans, really looks, and makes a decision that costs her everything. "All of you, come with me," she says. "I'll cook." What she doesn't realize is that feeding these 30 forgotten men is about to bring something to her door no one would ever expect. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The kitchen light flickered weakly as Loretta May Jackson stood at her worn Formica table, moving items into careful piles. 6 cans of beans, 4 cans of tomatoes, $2.37 in quarters and dimes, 31 blood pressure pills in an orange bottle. "Lord, have mercy," she whispered, touching each item like a rosary. The tax notice beneath her cracked sugar jar seemed to glow red in the dim light, demanding attention she couldn't give it. Her ancient refrigerator hummed and rattled, threatening to quit, just like the back burner on her stove. That burner only worked when she hit it with the wooden spoon hanging on a nail nearby, a trick Elijah had figured out years ago before cancer took him. The soup she'd made yesterday still had enough for 2 servings. Mrs. Dolores Whitfield's cough had sounded awful through the thin walls last night. Loretta May poured the soup into her last clean plastic container, the steam fogging up her glasses. A knock at the back door made her smile. Right on time. Andre Pike stood there, his backpack slung over one shoulder, trying to look casual, though his eyes darted to the kitchen counter, where she usually left him something for breakfast. "Good morning, Mrs. Jackson," he said politely. "Come in out of that cold, child." She pulled half a loaf of bread from her near-empty bread box. "You eat before school today?" "Yes, ma'am," he lied, his stomach growling loudly enough to make them both laugh. Well, take this anyway. Growing boys need extra." She wrapped the bread in a paper towel, adding 2 slightly bruised apples she'd been saving. Andre's face lit up, but he hesitated. "You sure you don't need it? What I need is to know you're fed proper." She patted his shoulder. "Now go on, before you're late." After Andre left, Loretta May gathered the collard greens she'd picked from her tiny backyard garden. They weren't much. The soil was poor and the weather hadn't been kind. But Deacon Samuel Reed never turned down donations for the church pantry. The screen door creaked open again. This time it was Evelyn, still in her nursing scrubs from the night shift. Exhaustion and frustration written across her face. "Mama, please tell me you're not giving away more food." Evelyn spotted the soup container and bread wrapper. "I knew it. You haven't even paid this month's light bill." "Good morning to you too, daughter." Loretta May kept her voice gentle. "How was work?" "Don't change the subject. These bills are serious." Evelyn snatched up the tax notice. "They're threatening to take the house, and you're out here running a charity." "I'm running nothing but my own kitchen, same as always." "That's the problem. You act like you've got Rockefeller money when you can barely keep your own lights on." Evelyn's voice cracked. "Why won't you think about yourself for once?" Loretta May set down her market tote. "Come here, baby." She pulled out a kitchen chair. "Sit with me a minute." Evelyn sat, but her jaw remained tight with worry. "You remember that dream I told you about? About the old church annex?" Loretta May asked. "Mama, not this again." "Just listen. That building's sitting there empty, falling apart. But I see what it could be. Tables with clean tablecloths, a proper kitchen, veterans and families eating together with their heads held high. Her eyes grew distant. No more people having to choose between medicine and meals. No more proud servicemen picking through dumpsters. "It's a beautiful dream," Evelyn said softly. "But dreams don't pay property taxes." "Maybe not, but they keep hope alive." Loretta May touched her daughter's hand. "Your daddy used to say a table should always have room for one more plate. Daddy also worked himself to death trying to keep this house." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "I can't watch you do the same thing." "I'm not working myself to death. I'm living the way I know is right." Loretta May stood, gathering her market tote. "There's soup in the fridge if you're hungry before you sleep. Where are you going now?" "To take these greens to the church, then to town to see what's on sale." She folded the tax notice carefully, tucking it into her apron pocket. "Don't worry so much, baby. The Lord ain't brought me this far to drop me now." Evelyn watched helplessly as her mother wrapped a thin scarf around her shoulders. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, promising cold rain. But Loretta May stepped out with her head high, her market tote swinging gently, as if the weight of unpaid bills didn't bend her shoulders at all. She paused at the bottom of her porch steps, looking up at the heavy clouds. The morning air bit through her worn coat, but she'd known colder days than this. She'd known hunger, loss, and invisible years of sacrifice. But she'd never known how to walk past suffering without trying to ease it, even when her own cup was empty. The fluorescent lights of Save More discount grocers buzzed overhead as Loretta May carefully counted her emergency dollars. The cashier, a tired-looking woman named Betty, watched with patience born from years of seeing customers stretch every penny. "Found some good deals today," Betty said kindly, scanning the marked-down vegetables. "These potatoes just got a bit of sprouting. Still perfectly fine." "Oh, yes," Loretta May agreed, examining the small chicken she'd chosen, the last one marked half price. "Just need a little extra love, that's all." Her total came to $18.43, leaving just $2 in her emergency fund. She packed everything carefully into her market tote, making sure the bruised tomatoes wouldn't get crushed under the rice bag. "Stay warm out there," Betty called as Loretta May headed for the exit. "Storm's coming in fierce." The wind had picked up while she'd been shopping, whipping her scarf around her face as she stepped outside. Dark clouds rolled overhead, heavy with promised rain. Loretta May pulled her coat tighter, grateful she'd worn her better shoes even if they pinched her toes. She'd walked these streets for decades, knew every crack in the sidewalk, every faded storefront, every spot where the concrete dipped and collected water. The railway overpass ahead marked the halfway point home. Its steel beams groaned in the wind, and graffiti marked its weathered walls, mostly gang signs and crude words, though someone had painted a small cross near the bottom. As she approached, movement caught her eye. A line of men huddled against the concrete wall, collars turned up against the wind. Some sat on flattened cardboard boxes, others stood with hands deep in pockets, heads bowed against the cold. The sight stopped her in her tracks. A tall man with a neat gray beard and dignified bearing despite his threadbare coat stepped forward. His eyes were clear and direct, his voice soft but carrying authority. "Morning, ma'am," he said. "Don't mean to startle you. I'm Isaiah Boone." "Loretta May Jackson," she replied, noting how the other men kept their distance, trying not to appear threatening. "Y'all look half frozen. What happened to the shelter?" "Boiler went out last night. Staff's short-handed, said they had to close early." Isaiah gestured to the men behind him. "We're all vets, ma'am. Not looking for trouble, just waiting for the shelter to reopen." A younger man nearby shivered violently, spilling coffee from a paper cup his trembling hands could barely hold. His jacket was thin, more suited for fall than winter. Another veteran, older with a pronounced limp, tried to share a torn blanket with him. 30 of us total, Isaiah continued. Some scattered to find other spots, but most stayed together. Safer that way. Loretta May looked at her grocery bag, then at the shivering men. The chicken would make a decent soup base. The rice could stretch. The vegetables, even bruised, would add substance. It wouldn't be fancy, but it would be hot. She thought of Evelyn's warnings, of her own empty pantry, of all the sensible reasons to keep walking. Then she thought of Elijah, who never could pass someone hungry without sharing what little they had. She thought of her own daddy, who came back from war with nightmares, but always said the thing that saved him was neighbors who treated him like family instead of a broken man. "Mr. Boone," she said finally, "I can't house you all. My place is too small, and that wouldn't be proper anyway." She paused, squaring her shoulders. "But I can feed you." Isaiah's weathered face showed surprise, then cautious hope. "Ma'am, we don't want to impose." "It's not imposing if you're invited." She shifted her market tote. "You'll need to come in shifts, maybe 6 or 7 at a time. And I expect military manners in my house?" "Yes, ma'am." Isaiah removed his cap, revealing gray hair cut regulation short. "We know how to follow orders." "This isn't orders, Mr. Boone. This is dinner." She glanced at the younger man still shivering. "First group in an hour. You bring that boy first, before he catches his death." Several of the men straightened instinctively at her tone, as if responding to a commander. Others looked away, perhaps embarrassed at needing help from an elderly woman who clearly had little herself. But no one refused. "God bless you, Mrs. Jackson," Isaiah said softly. "God already did, giving me enough to share." She turned toward home, then looked back. "My house is the yellow one on Magnolia Street, 3 blocks past the Baptist church. White trim, garden out back. You'll see the porch light." The wind cut sharper as she hurried home, her mind already calculating how to turn one chicken into enough meat for 30 men. She'd need to dig into her emergency supplies, the dried beans in the back of the cabinet, the cornmeal she'd been saving, maybe even the good spices she used only on holidays. Evelyn would be furious. The tax notice crackled in her apron pocket, a paper reminder of all the reasons this was foolish. But some things mattered more than being sensible. Some moments asked you to choose between security and humanity. Her legs ached from walking, her fingers numbed around the market tote handles, but her heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. Because sometimes the right choice was also the hard choice, and sometimes you had to trust that when you emptied your cup for others, God would find a way to fill it again. Loretta May's key scraped in the lock as she shouldered open her front door, market tote heavy against her hip. The familiar sight of her kitchen, the worn linoleum floor, the ancient stove with its temperamental burners, the nearly bare shelves, made her pause in the doorway. She drew one long, steadying breath, then set her shoulders and stepped inside. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered, unpacking her groceries. The chicken looked smaller on her counter than it had in the store. The bruised vegetables wouldn't feed 30 hungry men without help. She reached for her telephone, an old corded model that sat on her kitchen wall. First call was to Deacon Samuel Reed. "Deacon? It's Loretta May. I need to borrow those folding chairs from the church basement." She listened for a moment. "No, not for Sunday dinner. For tonight, and any extra tables you can spare." The deacon's concern carried through the line. "Tonight? Loretta May, what are you planning?" "Just doing what needs doing." She explained about the veterans, keeping her voice steady. "They're somebody's sons, Deacon. Somebody's brothers. Can't let them go hungry in this weather." After a pause, he sighed. "I'll bring what I can in my truck. Give me an hour." Her next call was 3 houses down, To Mrs. Dolores Whitfield. The elderly widow had been collecting cookware since her wedding day in 1962. Dolores? Those big soup pots you used for church suppers, are they still in your basement? Loretta May twisted the phone cord between her fingers. I need to borrow them. All of them. Mrs. Whitfield didn't hesitate. Andre can carry them over. That boy's always looking for ways to earn pocket money. Loretta May counted the remaining dollars from her birthday card. Money she'd been saving for new curtains. The old ones were so thin they barely blocked the draft. But curtains wouldn't feed empty stomachs. She tucked the bills into her purse and headed for Leonard Pike's corner store. The bell chimed as she entered. Mr. Pike looked up from his newspaper. Twice in one day, Loretta May? Must be important. Need 3 more chickens, she said. And all the cornbread mix you've got. Onions, too, if they're not too dear. He studied her face. Feeding an army? Something like that. While Mr. Pike gathered her items, she examined the dented cans on his clearance shelf. Some were missing labels, marked down to almost nothing. She added them to her pile. The screen door slammed behind her as she returned home. Evelyn's car sat in the driveway, and Loretta May's heart sank. Her daughter stood in the kitchen, staring at the pots already simmering on the stove. "Mama, what are you doing?" Evelyn's voice was tight with frustration. "Mrs. Whitfield said you're expecting 30 men? Have you lost your mind? They're veterans, baby. The shelter turned them away. And that's your problem, how?" Evelyn picked up an empty beanbag. "This was supposed to last you all week. I saw those tax notices. You can barely feed yourself." Loretta May measured rice into a pot, her movements precise. "I can't solve every problem in the world, but I can solve hunger for one night." "That's just it. You're always solving everybody else's problems." Evelyn's voice rose. "What about your own problems? What about your family?" "Baby, hunger is family." Loretta May turned to face her daughter. "Your daddy taught me that. When somebody's hungry enough to swallow their pride and ask, they become your people. That's what community means." "Community won't pay your bills." Evelyn grabbed her purse. "I can't watch you do this to yourself again." The door slammed behind her. Loretta May wiped her hands on her apron and kept working. As dusk settled, Andre Pike helped carry in Mrs. Whitfield's pots. Deacon Samuel arrived with chairs and tables. The kitchen filled with steam from simmering beans, the smell of chicken and onions, cornbread turning golden in the oven. At 6 o'clock sharp, Isaiah Boone appeared with the first group. They removed their wet shoes, lining them carefully on the porch. Hats came off as they entered. They moved with military precision, each man waiting to be told where to sit. "None of that now," Loretta May said, pulling out chairs. "This isn't a soup line. This is dinner." She set real plates before them, mismatched china collected over decades, real glasses for their water, real silverware, not plastic. The men sat straight-backed, uncertain, as if they'd forgotten how to be guests instead of charity cases. Isaiah helped serve, his manner graceful despite his worn clothes. Some men ate in silence, eyes down. Others murmured quiet thanks. A few wiped tears from their weathered faces when they thought no one was looking. Group after group arrived. The kitchen never emptied. Steam fogged the windows. Between servings, Loretta May heard fragments of their stories. Lost jobs, broken marriages, nights spent in cars or under bridges. They spoke of missed children, abandoned dreams, the endless maze of Veterans Affairs paperwork. She served each man herself, remembering their names, asking about food allergies, offering seconds without making them ask. When one veteran apologized for his shaking hands, she simply moved the water pitcher closer without comment. The final group arrived as evening deepened. They were fewer, perhaps more hesitant. Among them was a man who moved differently than the others. Quieter, more contained. He introduced himself as Nathaniel Price in a soft voice that nonetheless commanded attention. While the others ate, Nathaniel's eyes traveled slowly around her home. He noted the photographs on the wall, the carefully patched curtains, the places where paint had been touched up by hand. His gaze lingered on every detail, as if reading a story written in the worn spots on her tablecloth and the careful arrangement of her few possessions. Loretta May felt the weight of his attention but kept serving, kept smiling, kept making sure every man had enough. The kitchen's warmth wrapped around the final group of veterans as evening settled into full darkness outside. Nathaniel Price sat beneath the mantel, his weathered hands cradling the plate Loretta May had given him. Steam rose from the food, but his attention had fixed on something else. The framed photograph above, showing two men in military uniforms, their faces young and serious against the faded backdrop. Loretta May noticed his gaze as she refilled water glasses. Most of her guests had been too hungry or tired to pay much attention to her home's details, but Nathaniel studied everything with quiet intensity. His eyes traced the photograph's edges, lingered on the faces, noted the dates penciled beneath. "Ma'am," he said softly, his voice carrying an authority that seemed at odds with his worn clothes. "Would you tell me about them?" He gestured toward the picture with careful respect. Loretta May set down her pitcher and smoothed her apron. "That's my Elijah on the left," she said, touching the frame gently. "Served 2 tours before coming home. War changed him some, made him quieter than he was before. But he stayed proud of his service right up until the Lord called him home." Several nearby veterans nodded in understanding. They knew about the kind of quiet that followed men home from war. "And the younger one?" Nathaniel's question came carefully, as if he already suspected the answer. "Daniel Jackson, Elijah's baby brother." Loretta May's voice softened. "Never did make it back from overseas. They said he died saving 3 of his fellow servicemen, but we never got all the details. Some nights, Elijah would sit right where you're sitting, staring up at that picture like he could somehow change what happened." Something flickered across Nathaniel's face. Recognition, pain, or both. But he masked it quickly. His fingers tightened slightly around his fork before relaxing again. Around them, the kitchen had taken on the gentle murmur of men allowing themselves to feel safe for the first time that day. In the corner, a veteran with silver-streaked hair held a piece of cornbread close to his face, tears tracking silently down his cheeks. "You all right there, brother?" Isaiah asked quietly from nearby. The man nodded, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "Yes, sir. Just this cornbread. Tastes exactly like my grandmother's used to. Hadn't thought about her kitchen in years." Across the room, another veteran stood carefully, his empty plate in hand. "Ms. Jackson, I noticed your front gates hanging crooked. I'm a carpenter by trade. Let me fix it tomorrow. Least I can do." "Not tomorrow," Loretta May said firmly but kindly. "Tonight, you're guests in this house, not workers. There's more cornbread if anyone's still hungry." She moved between the tables, refilling plates, remembering who had mentioned food allergies earlier, making sure no one felt rushed despite the late hour. Her own fatigue didn't matter. These men had carried heavier burdens than tired feet. Nathaniel watched her movements, noting how she stretched portions without making it obvious, how she remembered each man's name after hearing it only once. When she passed near his chair again, he spoke. "May I ask you something, Ms. Jackson?" She paused, dish towel draped over her arm. "Of course. Why did you do this?" His eyes were intent, searching. "You clearly don't have resources to spare. Yet you spent everything you had on strangers. Why?" The kitchen grew quieter, other veterans listening without seeming to. Loretta May considered her answer carefully. "Because being hungry isn't just about food," she said finally. There's a hunger that comes from being invisible, from having people look right through you like you don't exist. I've seen that look in too many eyes, especially veterans. Sometimes feeding somebody's dignity is as important as feeding their body. Nathaniel held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. The evening wound down slowly. Men helped stack chairs, insisted on washing dishes despite her protests, thanked her with military precision and heartfelt words. Isaiah organized the last group's departure, making sure no one left anything behind. After the final goodbye, after the last footsteps faded from her porch, Loretta May began her nightly routine of checking locks and turning off lights. As she straightened a chair in the dining room, something caught her eye, a gleam of metal beneath the seat. She bent down and picked up what looked like a large coin, heavy and cold in her palm. One side bore an intricate design she didn't recognize. The other carried symbols and words she couldn't quite make out in the dim light. It wasn't ordinary currency. It seemed more like a medallion or token of some kind. Walking to the mantel, Loretta May placed the mysterious coin beside Elijah's photograph. Her fingertips lingered on its smooth edge for a moment before she turned away. The kitchen still held warmth from all the cooking, and traces of conversation seemed to echo in the corners. She was bone-tired, but satisfied in a way that had nothing to do with food. With one last glance at the coin gleaming dully in the lamplight, Loretta May switched off the final light and headed to her bedroom. The night's work was done, and tomorrow would bring its own concerns. For now, she had done what needed doing, and that was enough. A deep rumble pulled Loretta May from sleep before the sun could touch her window. At first, she thought it was thunder, but the sound was too mechanical, too organized. Engines, dozens of them, idling outside her house. Then came the rhythmic thud of boots on pavement, precise and purposeful. The silence that followed felt unnatural, like the whole world holding its breath. Loretta May's heart quickened as she slipped on her robe and house shoes. After decades on Magnolia Street, she knew every normal morning sound. Mrs. Whitfield's screen door squeaking at 6, Andre Pike's bicycle rattling past for his paper route, the distant whistle of the freight train. This silence was different, heavy, waiting. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the living room curtain. The worn fabric felt cool against her palm as she drew it back just enough to peek outside. The sight stopped her breath. Men in uniform filled Magnolia Street from corner to corner, standing at parade rest in precise rows. Veterans in leather jackets and service patches lined the sidewalks. Motorcycles gleamed in the pale dawn light, American flags rippling from their handlebars. Black SUVs with government plates blocked both ends of the street. "Dear Lord in heaven," Loretta May whispered. On nearby porches, neighbors gathered in frightened clusters. "Mrs.?" Whitfield clutched her housecoat closed, whispering urgently to Mr. Pike. The Martinez family huddled on their steps, their youngest hiding behind his mother's legs. Everyone stared at Loretta May's house like it had become the center of something dangerous. The screen door banged open behind her. "Mama!" Evelyn burst in, still wearing her nursing scrubs from the night shift. "What did those men do? Are you hurt?" "I saw all these vehicles and thought—" "Hush now," Loretta May said, though her own voice shook. "I'm fine. I just don't understand." She moved to her front door, Evelyn close behind. The porch boards creaked under their feet as they stepped outside. The morning air was sharp with winter's edge, carrying the scent of exhaust and coffee from paper cups clutched in gloved hands throughout the crowd. A figure detached itself from the front row of men and walked with military precision toward her house. Loretta May's eyes widened as she recognized him, the quiet veteran from last night, Nathaniel Price. But he was transformed. Gone were the worn clothes and humble demeanor. He wore a formal dress uniform decorated with rows of ribbons and medals that caught the rising sun. His bearing radiated authority, the kind that came from years of command. Each step carried the weight of experience and respect. He stopped at the bottom of her porch steps, drew himself up, and rendered a crisp salute. "Ms. Loretta May Jackson," his voice carried clearly across the silent street. "On behalf of the United States Naval Special Warfare Community and our brothers in arms, we come to honor you." Evelyn gripped her mother's arm. "Mama, what's happening?" Nathaniel continued, lowering his salute. "The challenge coin you found last night belongs to me. I am a retired Navy SEAL commander, and the men you fed included several of my former teammates who have fallen on hard times." He gestured to the assembled crowd. "Word of what you did spread through our networks overnight. How an elderly woman living on Social Security emptied her kitchen to feed 30 homeless veterans. How you served them at your table with dignity, treating them like honored guests instead of burdens. How you gave everything you had without hesitation." Loretta May's vision blurred with tears. Behind her, she heard Evelyn's soft gasp of understanding. "We came," Nathaniel said, his voice warming, "because people like you should never stand alone. Because kindness like yours deserves to be recognized. Because too often, the quiet heroes who hold our communities together go unseen." A breeze stirred the flags and lifted a piece of paper tacked beside Loretta May's porch, a county notice she'd been avoiding. The red stamp across its face was visible to everyone. Final warning. Tax delinquent. Property subject to seizure. Nathaniel's eyes flickered to the notice, then back to Loretta May. Something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps, of how pride and need could live so close together. She straightened her shoulders, conscious of her faded robe and house shoes, but holding herself with the same dignity she'd shown the night before. All around her, hundreds of men stood at attention, waiting. "I just did what needed doing," she said softly. "Same as any of you would." "That's exactly why we're here, ma'am." Nathaniel turned to face the assembled crowd. His voice rang out like a command. "Present arms!" As one, 300 men snapped to attention and saluted. The sound of hundreds of boots striking pavement echoed down Magnolia Street like thunder. Loretta May stood trembling on her porch, one hand pressed to her heart. Evelyn's arm slipped around her waist, supporting her. The sun finally crested the rooftops, sending long shadows across the sea of uniforms and lighting up the tears on Loretta May's cheeks. All around them, neighbors emerged from their houses, understanding now that this was no threat, but a tribute. Mrs. Whitfield dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Mr. Pike removed his cap. Andre stopped his bicycle in the middle of the street, paper route forgotten, mouth open in awe. The salutes held steady. No one moved. No one spoke. 300 men stood frozen in respect for one woman who had opened her door to the forgotten. The salute ended with another sharp command from Nathaniel, and Magnolia Street erupted into organized chaos. Veterans and SEALs moved with practiced efficiency, breaking into teams without needing direction. Years of military training showed in their synchronized movements as they spread across Loretta May's property. "Ma'am, permission to clear those fallen branches?" A broad-shouldered SEAL in working clothes approached the porch, pointing to the storm debris littering her yard. Before Loretta May could answer, 3 more men were already gathering tools from a truck. They worked methodically, creating neat piles of brush, while another group tackled her sagging fence with hammers and fresh boards. "They just know what to do," Evelyn whispered, watching the transformation unfold. Loretta May gripped the porch railing. "I never meant to cause all this fuss." A line of SUVs pulled up, and teams began unloading supplies, boxes of groceries, space heaters, warm blankets, cases of bottled water. Everything moved with precision, each item catalogued and organized on folding tables that appeared as if by magic. The rumble of a familiar truck announced Deacon Samuel Reed's arrival. He stepped out with a group of church volunteers, coffee urns, and breakfast supplies. His eyes were wide at the sight of so many uniformed men, but he quickly found his purpose. "We'll set up the coffee station here," he directed his team, pointing to a clear spot near the driveway. "These men need something warm after standing in the cold." A woman with a professional camera moved carefully through the scene, documenting without intruding. Her Navy press credentials identified her as Alicia Warren. She captured the organized activity, but kept a respectful distance from Loretta May, seeming to understand the delicate balance between recording history and preserving dignity. "Please," Loretta May said, her voice trembling as she watched more supplies arrive. "I'm not some kind of saint. I don't want people feeling sorry for me." Nathaniel climbed the porch steps, his manner direct but gentle. "This isn't pity, Ms. Jackson. These men recognize service when they see it. They're responding to something familiar, the kind of quiet sacrifice that holds communities together." A familiar figure emerged from the crowd, Isaiah Boone, leading the same 30 veterans from the night before. They looked different now. Faces washed, clothes somewhat neater, carrying themselves with renewed purpose. They formed a protective circle near Loretta May's porch, as if guarding the woman who had guarded their dignity. "We brought coffee this time," Isaiah said with a small smile, holding up a cardboard carrier. Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching the scene with conflicting emotions crossing her face. Her eyes followed the efficient movement of supplies, but more than that, she observed the faces of people coming forward with stories about her mother's past kindnesses. The teenager who'd received lunch money in secret, the widow who'd found groceries on her porch during hard times, the veteran who'd been welcomed for Sunday dinner when he had nowhere else to go. "Mama," Evelyn said softly, "I had no idea how many people—" "Hush now," Loretta May cut her off, embarrassed. "Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," Nathaniel said, joining them. "You did." He lowered his voice, speaking just to Loretta May. "About the tax notice and your roof. Those problems won't be ignored. We take care of our own, and you've proven you're part of this family." The morning light strengthened, illuminating the transformed block. Where there had been decay and neglect, now there was purposeful activity. Veterans who had stood in the cold the night before now helped distribute supplies to others in need. Church members worked alongside SEALs, passing out coffee and breakfast sandwiches. Mrs. Whitfield emerged from her house with a tray of fresh biscuits. Mr. Pike's corner store sent over more coffee and pastries. The Martinez family brought tamales. Neighbors who had watched fearfully earlier now joined the effort, turning the military operation into a community gathering. Alicia Warren captured it all through her lens. The precise movements of the military teams, the grateful faces of the veterans, the gradual warming of the neighborhood, and at the center of it all, Loretta May's small figure on the porch, still in her house shoes, watching her world expand beyond recognition. A reporter from the local news station pushed through the crowd. Microphone extended. "Ms. Jackson, could you tell us your story? How long have you been helping veterans? What made you open your door last night?" For the first time that morning, Loretta May hesitated. She looked at the camera, at the microphone, at all the eyes turned toward her. The questions seemed to strip away the simple truth of what she'd done, turning a natural act of kindness into something that needed explanation. Isaiah stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of her. Other veterans moved closer, forming a subtle barrier between Loretta May and the press. They recognized something the reporters couldn't, that some forms of service spoke loudest when they remained quiet. The morning sun caught the silver threading in Loretta May's hair, the worn boards of her porch, the fresh paint being applied to her fence. Around her, 300 men who had arrived in formation now moved in orchestrated patterns of support, turning military precision toward the act of restoration. They understood, as she did, that true service asked no permission and sought no praise. The reporter's question hung in the air as Loretta May stood surrounded by the evidence of her impact, not in the cameras or the attention, but in the changed faces of 30 veterans who had come back to help others as they had been helped. Inside Loretta May's kitchen, the morning sun filtered through worn curtains as voices mixed with the steady rhythm of hammers and saws from outside. Alicia Warren set up her small recorder on the kitchen table, careful to avoid the coffee cups and plate of biscuits Mrs. Whitfield had insisted on bringing over. "Ms. Jackson, would you mind telling me how long you've been helping people in this neighborhood?" Alicia's tone was gentle, professional but warm. Loretta May smoothed her apron, uncomfortable with the attention. "Oh, I don't keep track of such things. You just do what needs doing." "Mama's been feeding folks since before I can remember," Evelyn said, her earlier tension softening as she poured more coffee. "Even when Daddy got sick and the medical bills piled up." Isaiah Boone nodded from his place near the window. "Word gets around on the streets. Veterans, especially. They know this porch is safe." Loretta May's hands worried at a loose thread on her placemat. "Sometimes people just need a good meal and somebody to see them proper. That's all." "It's more than that," Nathaniel said quietly. He'd been watching Loretta May with careful attention. "Tell her about the widows, Ms. Jackson, and the school children." Alicia leaned forward slightly, her recorder catching Loretta May's soft voice as memories spilled out. There was Mrs. Thompson, whose husband passed suddenly last winter. Loretta May had taken her soup every Wednesday for months. The Martinez children, whose mother worked double shifts at the hospital. They'd found packed lunches on their porch on days when money ran tight. "And the veterans?" Alicia prompted. "They come through sometimes, looking lost," Loretta May explained. "You can see it in their eyes. Like they're carrying something heavy nobody else can see. She glanced at the photograph of Daniel and Elijah on the mantel. "I remember how my husband was when he came home. How his brother never did." Nathaniel's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. "About that, Ms. Jackson, there's something you should know about Daniel." The kitchen grew quiet, except for the distant sound of work crews. The unit Daniel served with. There was a man there, James Morrison. After the war, Morrison became a mentor to many of us in the SEAL teams. He never stopped talking about the brave kid from Georgia who saved his life in a firefight. That kid was your Daniel. Loretta May's hand went to her throat. "Daniel? My Daniel?" "Yes, ma'am. Morrison passed a few years back, but his stories about Daniel shaped how many of us understood sacrifice. When I saw that photo last night," Nathaniel's controlled voice wavered slightly. "Well, it felt like everything came full circle." Evelyn reached for her mother's hand. Outside, a truck arrived with roofing materials, and voices called back and forth with military precision. "I had no idea," Loretta May whispered. "Daniel was just my husband's baby brother, always smiling, always helping somebody." "Like his family," Isaiah observed quietly. Alicia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her eyes widened. "Ms. Jackson, the interview clip we posted an hour ago. It's already being shared thousands of times. People are asking how they can help." "Help?" Loretta May looked startled. "The donations are coming in faster than we can process them," Nathaniel confirmed. "Deacon Samuel has his whole office staff trying to keep up with the calls. There's a contractor outside right now offering to fix your roof for free. The Southeast Veterans Alliance wants to talk about some kind of partnership." Evelyn watched her mother's face, seeing past the worry lines to the woman who had quietly served others for decades. All these years, Mama, I thought you were just being stubborn. But these people, they see what I should have seen. Baby, you were just trying to protect me. Loretta May squeezed her daughter's hand. Tell them about your dream, Isaiah encouraged. About the church annex. Loretta May hesitated, then slowly shared her long-held vision. A proper kitchen that could serve hot meals daily, tables where people could eat with dignity, maybe even some services to help veterans get back on their feet. That old church annex down the street, she said, almost apologetically. I always thought if somebody fixed it up. Nathaniel turned to look out the window toward the abandoned building at the end of Magnolia Street. Its brick walls were solid despite the broken windows and overgrown yard. Maybe that dream is not as impossible as you think. The kitchen settled into thoughtful quiet. Through the window, they could see teams of veterans and SEALs working steadily on the house repairs. Mrs. Whitfield arrived with another plate of biscuits. Andre Pike darted between the workers, proudly helping to carry tools. The Martinez family set up a lunch station for the work crews. Alicia's recorder captured it all. The steady murmur of voices, the comfortable scrape of coffee cups, the distant rhythm of hammers that seemed to echo the beating heart of a neighborhood coming alive. Here, in this worn kitchen, with its patched curtains and carefully mended chairs, something larger than charity was taking shape, a recognition of the quiet service that had held this community together through countless hard days. Loretta May watched her visitors with eyes that had seen decades of struggle but never lost their warmth. The morning sun caught the silver in her hair, highlighting a dignity that no hardship had ever diminished. Her simple table had become a gathering place for unlikely allies, a journalist, a SEAL commander, a homeless veteran, and a daughter finally seeing her mother's strength in full light. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the overgrown lot as Loretta May and her small group picked their way through knee-high weeds toward the abandoned church annex. Paint peeled from its weathered brick walls and plywood covered most windows, but the building's bones remained strong against the sky. "Watch your step there, Ms. Jackson," Isaiah cautioned, offering his arm as they navigated past broken concrete. Deacon Samuel Reed moved ahead to unlock the heavy front door, its hinges groaning with disuse. "Lord, it's been years since anyone's been inside," the deacon said, pushing the door wide. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight that cut through the musty darkness. Nathaniel pulled out a flashlight, sweeping its beam across the fellowship hall. Despite the cobwebs and debris, the space stretched wide and welcoming. High windows lined the walls, their dirty panes dimming the natural light but promising brightness once cleaned. "Look at that kitchen," Evelyn said, moving toward the back. Her shoes echoed on the solid floor. "Those are commercial-grade sinks. Mama, remember when the ladies' auxiliary used to cook here?" Loretta May nodded, running her hand along a steel countertop. 3 deep sinks. Good ventilation hood, too, if it still works. You could feed an army from this kitchen. Or 30 veterans, Isaiah added with a gentle smile. Plus, whoever else needs a good meal. Alicia Warren filmed as they explored, her camera capturing both the decay and the potential. Beyond the main hall, corridors branched to smaller rooms, old Sunday school spaces and offices that could be repurposed. These could be counseling rooms, Nathaniel observed, checking the structural integrity of a doorframe. Private spaces for veterans to meet with support services. Maybe some computer stations for job searches. And here, Isaiah pointed to a separate wing. With the right plumbing work, you could install shower facilities, clean clothes storage. Give people a chance to restore their dignity before job interviews. Loretta May stood in the center of the fellowship hall, her eyes distant with possibility. "Tables here," she said softly. "Real tables with proper chairs, not folding stuff. Plants in the windows. Maybe some of those veterans who like to garden could help grow fresh vegetables out back. The foundation appears solid, Deacon Samuel noted, tapping the walls. Roof needs work, but it's not beyond saving. Through the grimy windows, they could see several of the 30 veterans Loretta May had fed gathering outside, drawn by curiosity about the activity. They spoke quietly among themselves, pointing at different areas of the building. "Some of us have construction experience," one man called through an open door. "Electrical work, carpentry. If this becomes something real, could be a way for folks to contribute their skills," Isaiah translated. "Give people ownership in building something meaningful." Evelyn watched her mother's face brighten with each new suggestion. The morning's overwhelm had transformed into focused purpose. This wasn't about charity or recognition anymore. It was about creating something lasting. Nathaniel pulled out his phone, making quick notes. With the right coalition of veteran support organizations, private donors, and community partners, this is absolutely feasible. The publicity from yesterday's events has opened doors. People want to help. They just need the right project to rally behind. "And the right person leading it," Alicia added, lowering her camera to smile at Loretta May. They continued through the building, listing needs and possibilities. The deacon mentioned church members with various skills who'd be willing to volunteer. Isaiah knew veterans organizations that could provide counselors and job placement assistance. Even the neighborhood kids peering through the windows began shouting offers to help clean up the yard. For several precious hours, the old annex hummed with renewed energy. Every broken window or water stain became an opportunity instead of an obstacle. The dust-filled air seemed to sparkle with promise. Then a shadow darkened one of the doorways. Milton Baines stood there in his expensive suit, looking oddly out of place among the cobwebs. His smile was practiced, professional, too wide by half. "Ms. Jackson," he said smoothly, "what a pleasure to see you here. I've been meaning to stop by after all the excitement yesterday." Loretta May's spine straightened. "Mr. Baines, I couldn't help noticing all this activity." He gestured vaguely at the building. "Of course, you realize the costs involved in restoration would be astronomical. The permits alone." He shook his head with carefully manufactured concern. "Perhaps this is the perfect time to discuss more realistic options? Moving on from the burdens of property ownership at your age would be the sensible choice." "My home's not for sale, Mr. Baines," Loretta May said firmly. "Never has been." Now, let's not be hasty." His smile never wavered. "Everything has its price, and with all these new complications," he left the threat hanging delicately in the dusty air. Nathaniel and Isaiah moved subtly closer to Loretta May, while Evelyn's eyes narrowed at the intruder's practiced smoothness. "Good day, Mr. Baines," Loretta May said, turning her back on him to discuss paint colors with Alicia. Milton Baines lingered a moment longer, that perfect smile still in place. Then he nodded courteously and withdrew, his expensive shoes crunching on broken glass as he crossed back to his waiting car. The afternoon sun continued to pour through the dirty windows, but its warmth felt somehow diminished. Their excited plans hung suspended in the sudden silence, like the dust motes that had danced so hopefully just hours before. The evening settled over Magnolia Street like a soft blanket, transforming the weathered neighborhood into something magical. Porch lights twinkled like earthbound stars, and the aroma of home-cooked dishes drifted through the warm air. The church parking lot had become an impromptu gathering space, with folding tables arranged in long rows beneath strings of borrowed Christmas lights. Mrs. Dolores Whitfield arrived carrying her famous sweet potato pie, the same woman who'd received soup from Loretta May just days before. Behind her came the Pike family, Andre proudly holding a steaming casserole his mother had made. Even Mr. Leonard Pike closed his corner store early to attend, bringing boxes of paper plates and plastic utensils. "Never seen anything like it," Deacon Samuel Reed remarked, watching the steady stream of neighbors arriving. "Folks who barely spoke last week are hugging like long-lost family." The 30 veterans had cleaned up and changed into fresh clothes provided by the SEAL network. They didn't cluster in corners as might be expected, but mixed easily with the families, helping set up chairs and move tables. Isaiah Boone worked the crowd like a natural host, making introductions and ensuring no one felt out of place. Loretta May stood near the church steps, her hands clasped together to hide their trembling. She wore her best dress, the blue one saved for Easter Sunday, and a small brooch that had belonged to her mother. Evelyn stood beside her, their shoulders touching in a way they hadn't for years. "Mama," Evelyn whispered, "look at all these people." The crowd had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Children darted between tables while their parents arranged dishes on the makeshift buffet. Old Mr. Thompson, who rarely left his house anymore, sat in his wheelchair telling war stories to a group of young veterans who listened with genuine interest. Nathaniel Price approached through the crowd, carrying something carefully wrapped in blue cloth. "Ms. Jackson," he said formally, "we have something for you." The conversations quieted as people noticed him. Loretta May straightened her spine, dignity wrapped around her like armor. "Your husband, Elijah's service record," Nathaniel explained, unwrapping the first frame. "We had it properly restored and authenticated." The document gleamed behind new glass, Elijah's name and commendations clear and proud. Loretta May's fingers traced the glass. "Oh," she breathed, "look how handsome he was in that photo." "And this," Nathaniel continued, revealing a second frame, "is a memorial citation honoring Daniel Jackson's sacrifice. It's signed by members of the unit he served with, including the man who later became my own mentor." The frames caught the light from the Christmas strings, reflecting like tears. Evelyn slipped her arm through her mother's, holding her steady. Deacon Samuel stepped forward, raising his hands for attention. "Before we eat," he announced, "let us pray." The crowd hushed, heads bowing. "Lord, we thank you not just for this food, not just for the help that's come our way, but for helping us remember who we are. This neighborhood's always had everything it needed. We just forgot how to share it. Thank you for Loretta May, who never forgot." "Amen," the crowd responded, and the celebration began in earnest. Evelyn took her place beside Loretta May in the serving line, something she hadn't done since her teenage years helping at church suppers. They fell into an old rhythm, Loretta May ladling out portions while Evelyn added the sides. "Remember when you used to sneak extra corn pudding to the kids who looked hungry?" Evelyn asked, laughing softly through sudden tears. "Just like my mama taught me," Loretta May replied. "Always watch for the quiet ones who won't ask." Alicia Warren moved through the crowd with her camera, capturing the moment without intruding on it. She'd told Loretta May earlier that 3 regional news stations had picked up the story, and donations were streaming in through various veterans organizations. The music from someone's portable speaker played low and sweet, old gospel tunes mixed with gentle jazz. People who'd lived as strangers on the same street for years now sat together, sharing food and stories. The veterans seemed to relax fully for the first time, their military bearings softening in the face of such ordinary human warmth. "The contractor's starting roof repairs tomorrow," Nathaniel told Loretta May during a quiet moment. "And we've got architects volunteering to draw up plans for the annex renovation." Hope bloomed in Loretta May's chest, warm and unexpected as spring flowers. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that the grinding weight of survival might finally ease. Then a heavy black sedan pulled into the church lot, its headlights cutting through the gentle glow of the evening. A man in a crisp city uniform stepped out, carrying a thick folder and wearing an expression that made conversations die as he passed. "Mrs. Jackson?" he called, scanning the crowd. "I'm Building Inspector Davis. We've received multiple complaints about unauthorized construction work, unsafe gatherings, and code violations." He held up a stack of official papers. "Both for your residence and the church annex property." The music from the speaker seemed to fade on its own, or perhaps it was just that everyone had gone so still they'd stopped hearing it. Loretta May felt the weight of every eye on her as the inspector approached, his shoes crunching on gravel in the sudden quiet. Beside her, Evelyn's hand tightened on her arm. The frames containing Elijah's service record and Daniel's memorial seemed to dim, as if even they recognized the shift in the evening's mood. The hopeful plans and promises that had felt so solid moments before began to waver like the shadows cast by the Christmas lights overhead. The fluorescent lights in the church office hummed with an artificial brightness that made everything look harsh and unforgiving. Loretta May sat in one of the old wooden chairs, her hands folded in her lap, while Deacon Samuel Reed spread the citations across his desk. Evelyn paced near the filing cabinet, and Nathaniel stood with his arms crossed, reading over the deacon's shoulder. "Multiple violations," Deacon Samuel said, his voice heavy. "Unlicensed food service, occupancy limits exceeded, makeshift electrical connections." He shuffled through the papers. "And that's just for tonight's gathering." "The house citations are worse," Nathaniel added, lifting another stack. "Structural concerns, non-permitted repairs, unsafe conditions." His jaw tightened. "All from anonymous complaints." Loretta May touched the edge of one document. Can they really stop everything? "Until inspections and reviews are complete." Deacon Samuel removed his reading glasses. "Could be weeks. Could be months." Evelyn stopped pacing. "We can't wait months. The roof's still leaking, the taxes are due, and winter's coming." The phone on the desk rang, making them all jump. Deacon Samuel answered, listened for a moment, then handed it to Nathaniel with a worried look. "Veterans Assistance Office." Nathaniel's expression darkened as he listened. "When?" he asked. "Who found it?" More listening. "No, don't release any funds until we sort this out. I'll call you back." He hung up and faced the others. "There's a problem with the donation account. An old medical lien has surfaced, tied to Elijah's final hospital stay. It was never properly cleared." "What does that mean?" Evelyn demanded. "It means the house title isn't clean," Nathaniel explained. "And until it's resolved, any incoming funds could be tied up in legal challenges." Loretta May closed her eyes briefly. Elijah worried so about those bills. Even at the end, he kept asking if I'd be okay. Deacon Samuel opened his laptop. "It gets worse. Alicia just sent this." He turned the screen to show them social media posts questioning the entire story. Some suggested the veteran gathering had been staged for donations. Others hinted at scams targeting patriotic donors. Photos of Loretta May's house appeared with circles around the repairs, labeled as suspicious improvements. "Who would do this?" Evelyn's voice cracked. A knock at the office door made them turn. Milton Baines stood in the doorway, his suit pristine despite the late hour, his smile practiced and calm. "I heard about the citations," he said smoothly. "Such a shame after all this attention." He removed an envelope from his jacket. "But I may have a solution that could help everyone." Nathaniel stepped forward. "This isn't a good time, Mr. Baines." "On the contrary." Milton placed the envelope on the desk. "This is exactly the right time. A cash offer, fair market value, no questions asked about liens or violations. Mrs. Jackson could walk away tonight with enough to start fresh somewhere more manageable." Evelyn snatched up the envelope. "How did you know about the lien so fast?" Milton's smile didn't waver. I make it my business to know about properties I'm interested in. The offer stands until morning." After he left, the fluorescent lights seemed to buzz louder in the silence. Evelyn opened the envelope, her hands shaking. "It's not enough," she said finally. "Not really, but it's something guaranteed." She looked at her mother. "Instead of promises that keep falling apart." "Evelyn," Deacon Samuel warned. "No!" Evelyn's control broke. "I'm tired of watching her suffer for other people. Love doesn't pay taxes. Love doesn't fix roofs. Love doesn't defeat paperwork. All those men out there with their salutes and speeches, where are they going to be when winter really hits and we're still fighting inspectors?" Each word landed like a physical blow. Loretta May's shoulders curved inward, but she didn't speak. "We can fight this," Nathaniel insisted. "Make it public. Show how they're targeting her." "No." Loretta May's voice was quiet but firm. "I won't be paraded around like that. I fed those men because they deserved dignity. I won't trade mine to keep a house." She stood, smoothing her dress. "I need to go home." "Mama," Evelyn started. "Just let me think." Loretta May walked out of the office, through the now empty church lot where celebration had blazed just hours before. The neighborhood had returned to its familiar darkness. Porch lights were off. Tables and chairs had vanished back into storage. Even the Christmas lights had been quickly packed away when the inspector appeared, as if people feared being associated with the gathering. Inside her house, the repairs stood frozen in various stages. Plastic sheeting crackled overhead, where the roof work had stopped mid-task. The newly installed kitchen cabinets sat with their doors half-hung. Water dripped steadily into bowls placed strategically around the room. Loretta May sat at her kitchen table, where the harsh glare of the single overhead bulb made everything look tired and old. Milton Baines's envelope lay before her, beside the framed service record that had seemed so hopeful just hours ago. The clock ticked toward midnight. Each drip of water from the ceiling marked another moment of decision slipping away. She touched the envelope, then pulled back as if it might burn her. Was this what miracles did? Make the fall harder by lifting you high enough to see what you could never have? She remembered the veterans' faces at dinner, the neighbors coming together, the dreams of a center where people could heal. Now it all felt like a cruel joke, as if she'd been allowed to taste something sweet just so she'd know exactly what she was losing. The water dripped, the clock ticked, and Loretta May sat alone in her half-mended house, wondering if she'd been wrong to ever believe in more than survival. Near dawn, a gentle tapping at the back door pulled Loretta May from her troubled thoughts. She'd been sitting at her kitchen table all night, watching shadows dance across Milton Baines's envelope, listening to the steady drip of rain through her compromised roof. The knock came again, hesitant but persistent. Loretta May wrapped her shawl tighter and made her way to the door. Through the glass pane, she recognized Isaiah Boone's weathered face in the gray pre-dawn light. "Miss Loretta?" he said when she opened the door, his voice rough with worry. "I'm sorry to come so early, but—" He twisted his cap in his hands, shoulders hunched against more than just the cold. "What's wrong, Isaiah?" She stepped aside to let him in from the chill. Inside her kitchen, Isaiah's usual calm demeanor crumbled. "It's Terrence Holloway. He was with us that night you fed everyone." His words tumbled out faster now. "Someone showed him those stories online, the ones saying it was all fake, that you're in trouble because of us." Loretta May's heart sank. The young man with the Marine's cap? Who helped stack the chairs? Isaiah nodded. "He took off last night. Said he poisons everything good he touches." He looked down at his hands. "He was doing better, Miss Loretta. Had 3 weeks clean. Was talking about maybe getting into that VA program." His voice trailed off. "Where would he go?" Loretta May asked, already moving toward her coat hook. "Probably the old freight yard," Isaiah said. There's some loading bays where folks shelter sometimes. But Miss Loretta, you don't have to. She turned to face him. Do you know what time he left? Few hours ago. But with everything you're dealing with. Isaiah gestured at the papers on her table, the dripping ceiling. This ain't your burden. Loretta May looked at Milton Baines's envelope, still sitting there like a lifeline to safety. She could sign it right now. Walk away from all this mess, all these broken pieces she couldn't possibly fix. It would be the sensible thing to do. Instead, she reached for her heavy wool coat. Help me gather some things. She moved through her kitchen with purpose, filling her old metal thermos with the coffee she'd made hours ago. She wrapped 6 leftover biscuits in a clean dish towel, added some cheese and apples she'd been saving. Her hands worked quickly, automatically, the same way they had when 30 hungry men stood in her yard. Miss Loretta, Isaiah tried again, you could lose everything. She paused, one hand on the thermos. Isaiah, did I ask those men for anything when I fed them? No, ma'am. Did I make them prove they deserved kindness? No, ma'am. She tucked the wrapped food into her large pocket. Then why would I start counting the cost now? She handed him the thermos to carry. Show me where to go. They walked through streets still wrapped in pre-dawn shadows. The air bit cold against their faces. Loretta May's arthritis complained with each step, but she kept pace with Isaiah's longer stride. They passed the church where celebrations had turned to chaos just hours before, then the abandoned annex that had briefly held such promise. The freight yard lay beyond the active tracks, a sprawl of old buildings and loading docks where weeds pushed through concrete. Isaiah led her carefully around debris, through a maze of rusted equipment. Their footsteps echoed in the hollow spaces. They found Terence in the deepest bay, huddled against corrugated metal walls. He looked smaller than Loretta May remembered, curled in on himself like he was trying to disappear. Go away, he said when he saw them, his voice cracking. I mess up everything. You saw what happened. All those people turning on Miss Loretta because she helped us. Loretta May didn't hesitate. She walked right up and sat beside him on an old wooden crate, smoothing her coat beneath her like she was settling in for Sunday service. First thing we need, she said, pulling out the wrapped biscuits, is something warm in our stomachs. She divided the food into 3 portions, passing them out with the same dignity she'd used at her dining table. I can't, Terence whispered. You can, she said firmly. Being in pain isn't the same as being a burden, child. Someone taught you wrong about that. She felt him trembling beside her as she unwrapped his portion, placed it carefully in his cold hands. Eat first. Then we'll talk about what's true and what isn't. Neither of them noticed the figure that appeared in the loading bay entrance. Nathaniel Price, still in his dress uniform from searching all night. He stood silently, watching Loretta May do exactly what she'd done before. Turn an empty space into something like home. Make a meal into communion. Choose love when calculation would have been easier. Isaiah saw him and moved to explain, but Nathaniel held up his hand. Let her work, his gesture said. Let her show us again what real strength looks like. In the growing dawn light, Loretta May sat in a rusted loading bay, sharing biscuits with 2 homeless veterans, as natural as if she were on her own porch. No cameras recorded it. No crowds gathered to applaud. Just a woman who knew that some kinds of hunger run deeper than food, and some forms of shelter have nothing to do with houses. Dawn crept across the freight yard, painting the rusty metal in shades of gold and rose. Nathaniel Price stepped carefully through the debris, his polished dress shoes incongruous against the broken concrete. He watched as Loretta May sat sharing the last of her biscuits with Terence, her movements unhurried and deliberate, as if they were at a proper breakfast table instead of the abandoned loading bay. Miss Loretta, Terence was saying, his voice steadier now, I saw those stories online. about how you might lose your house because of helping us, about the complaints and the inspectors. Child, do you think you're the first person to need help when it wasn't convenient? Loretta May adjusted her shawl against the morning chill. Or that you're somehow responsible for Milton Baines being who he is? Isaiah shifted on his feet. Milton Baines? The man who's been trying to buy your house? Nathaniel cleared his throat, making his presence known. The man who's been trying to buy a lot of houses, from what I'm hearing. Loretta May didn't seem surprised to see him there. She simply nodded in greeting, then poured the last of the coffee from her thermos into its cup for Terence. I've been thinking about this all wrong, Nathaniel said, moving closer. We've been fighting the wrong battle. This isn't just about saving one house or celebrating one act of kindness. There's something bigger happening here. Been happening for years, Isaiah added quietly. Seen it before. Old folks get pressured to sell, especially after someone reports them for every little thing wrong with their property. Alicia Warren appeared at the entrance to the loading bay, her camera hanging unused at her side. I've been making some calls, she said. 4 other homeowners on Magnolia Street got hit with anonymous complaints in the past year. All of them received offers from Milton Baines's company within days. Mrs. Thompson down the street, Loretta May murmured, lost her house last spring after they said her porch was unsafe. She'd lived there 40 years. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. And now they're using the attention around your kindness against you, making it look like you're running some kind of unauthorized operation instead of just feeding hungry people. The lien on your house, Alicia continued, pulling out her notebook. I spoke to a contact at the Veterans Legal Aid Network. They're interested in reviewing the whole file. Apparently, there are strict rules about how medical debts can be transferred and collected, especially when they involve service members or their families. Terence had been listening intently, his earlier shame giving way to anger. So they're not just going after Miss Loretta. They're targeting everyone who can't fight back? Not anymore, Nathaniel said firmly. Because now we know what we're really dealing with. This isn't about one house or one inspection. It's about people with money seeing vulnerability as an opportunity. Loretta May smoothed her coat, a gesture that somehow carried both weariness and dignity. I'm tired of fighting, Nathaniel. Every day is already a fight, just to keep going. Then let us fight for you, Isaiah said, like you fought for us when we were hungry. And let me help, Terence added suddenly. Please. At the church kitchen. I know it's not much, but I used to work in food service before. He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. I can still be useful. Loretta May studied him for a long moment. You want to help in my kitchen? Yes, ma'am, if you'll have me. Then I expect you there at 7 tomorrow morning, she said simply. We've got biscuits to make. A small smile cracked through Terence's worried expression. Yes, ma'am. This is what they don't understand, Nathaniel said softly. They see houses and profit margins. They don't see how a community actually works, how it heals itself if you let it. The Veterans Network lawyers want to review everything, Alicia added. Not just your case, Miss Loretta, but the whole pattern. They're especially interested in how these complaints keep appearing right before the purchase offers. The sound of quick footsteps interrupted them. Evelyn appeared in the entrance, slightly out of breath, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a long night shift. She stopped short at the sight of them all gathered there. "Mama," she said, her voice thick, "I've been looking everywhere for you." Her eyes were red-rimmed, glistening with tears. "When you weren't home, I thought. I was so afraid you'd gone to sign those papers." "Baby, what's wrong?" Loretta May started to rise, but Evelyn crossed the space between them in 3 quick steps and dropped to her knees beside the wooden crate. "I've been so wrong," Evelyn said, gripping her mother's hands. "All this time, I thought being strong meant being practical, protecting ourselves. I kept pushing you to think about yourself first, to stop helping everyone else." She drew a shaky breath. "But I watched you walk away from a chance to save yourself, because someone needed you more. That's real strength. That's what you've been trying to show me all along." The morning light streamed through the loading bay entrance, catching the tears on Evelyn's cheeks. Loretta May reached out and brushed them away, the same gentle motion she'd used when Evelyn was small. "We're going to fight this," Evelyn continued. "The right way. Not by giving up everything you believe in. Not by turning away from people who need help." Late morning sunlight warmed the worn wooden steps of Loretta May's porch as she sat beside Evelyn, both women watching the small crowd of volunteers gathered across the patchy yard. The familiar creak of the boards beneath them seemed to echo years of unspoken words. "Remember when you used to braid my hair right here?" Evelyn asked softly, running her hand along the weathered wood. "Every Sunday morning, before church. You'd squirm something fierce," Loretta May smiled. "Always in such a hurry to be done." "I was in a hurry about everything back then." Evelyn's voice caught. "Still am, I suppose. Always rushing to fix things, to get ahead, to make sure we'd be safe." She looked down at her hands. "When Daddy got sick, I watched those medical bills pile up like mountains. Saw how the dreams you both had just kept getting smaller and smaller." Loretta May stayed quiet, letting her daughter find the words that had been buried so long. "Then, after he passed, every time you gave something away, food, money, time, I'd feel this panic." Evelyn's fingers twisted in her lap. Like generosity itself was dangerous. Like kindness was going to leave us with nothing. I started seeing every borrowed cup of sugar as a threat, every shared meal as a step closer to disaster. "Oh, baby." Loretta May reached for her daughter's hand. "Why didn't you tell me? How could I? You were already carrying so much. And you made it look—" Evelyn swallowed hard. "You made it look easy. Like having almost nothing didn't hurt. Like giving away what little we had was natural as breathing." "It wasn't easy," Loretta May admitted. "And I made mistakes too. Hiding bills, pretending things weren't as tight as they were. I thought I was protecting you from worry, but maybe I was just making it harder for you to understand." "I was so afraid," Evelyn whispered. "Not just of being poor. We'd been poor before. I was afraid of ending up invisible. Like you were invisible, Mama. Working so hard, helping so many, and still having to count out pennies for blood pressure pills." Across the yard, Isaiah Boone and Terence Holloway stood quietly with the other veterans, waiting for direction but giving mother and daughter the space they needed. Nathaniel Price approached slowly from the sidewalk, a folder tucked under his arm. "I've got news," he said, stopping at the bottom of the steps. "The lawyers think they've found something. That lien from the hospital. There are irregularities in how it was transferred. And Alicia's been gathering statements all morning from other homeowners who got pressured by Milton Baines." Loretta May straightened her shoulders. "How many?" "7 so far. All with similar stories. Anonymous complaints, sudden inspections, then quick offers to buy before they could fix anything." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "It's not random. It's a system." Deacon Samuel Reed crossed the yard to join them, his work boots leaving prints in the morning dew. "Church council just met. They've voted to open the fellowship hall as a temporary headquarters. We've got phones, tables, whatever you need to organize." "The men want to help," Isaiah added, stepping forward with Terence. "We can split into teams, go door to door, get more statements from folks who've been targeted." Terence nodded eagerly. "People might talk to us different than officials. We know what it's like when nobody wants to hear your story." Evelyn stood up, brushing off her scrubs. Something had shifted in her face, the worried tension replaced by something fiercer, more focused. "I've got contacts at the hospital too, in records. They might be able to help track down other liens like Mama's. You don't have to take this on, Loretta May started. But Evelyn shook her head. Yes, I do. All these years, I thought protecting you meant trying to make your world smaller, safer. She helped her mother to her feet. I was wrong. Sometimes love means helping people stand in the light, even when it's scary. You taught me that, Mama. I just forgot for a while. The volunteers began to gather closer, sensing a shift in the morning's quiet. Alicia Warren arrived with her camera and notebook. Isaiah started organizing the veterans into canvassing teams, and Deacon Samuel Reed was already on his phone coordinating with church members. The city council just called, Nathaniel announced, checking his phone. They've scheduled an emergency public hearing for tonight. 7 o'clock. That's fast, Evelyn said. They're hoping to catch us unprepared, Nathaniel replied. But they don't know who they're dealing with. No, Loretta May said softly. They surely don't. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the patched roof and weathered siding of the house that had sheltered so many meals, so many prayers, so many moments of quiet giving. Up and down Magnolia Street, porches that had been empty now held watching neighbors. Windows that had been dark began to show lights. What do you need us to do first? Evelyn asked her mother, and for the first time in years, there was no fear in the question. No urgent need to fix or control or protect. Just a daughter standing ready beside her mother, facing whatever came next together. Terence stepped forward, the same quiet strength he'd found in the freight yard still holding steady. Whatever you decide, Miss Loretta, we're with you. The volunteers nodded, the veterans straightened, and Magnolia Street seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. 7 o'clock wasn't far away, but they had something Milton Baines and his paperwork could never touch. A community awakening to its own power, and a truth that needed telling at last. The city council chamber, with its dark wood panels and fluorescent lights, strained to contain the crowd that packed every available space. Neighbors from Magnolia Street filled the front rows, many still wearing work uniforms or church clothes. Behind them sat dozens of church members, including Deacon Samuel Reed and his wife, their Bibles resting in their laps. Veterans lined the walls, Isaiah Boone and Terence Holloway among them, standing shoulder to shoulder with quiet dignity. At the back of the room, rows of uniformed servicemen created a wall of silent presence, their disciplined stillness a reminder of the force that had gathered on Loretta May's doorstep just days before. Reporters clutched notepads and microphones, their cameras trained on the podium where council members shuffled papers and adjusted microphones. Alicia Warren positioned herself near the front, her own camera ready to document whatever came next. Milton Baines swept in through the side door like he owned the room, his suit pressed sharp enough to cut paper. He nodded to several council members with the easy familiarity of someone used to private meetings and quick favors. His lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, spread documents across their assigned table with practiced efficiency. "Just a misunderstanding," Baines murmured to anyone within earshot, his smile never wavering. "We're here to help struggling homeowners find solutions." Nothing more complicated than that. Evelyn, sitting beside her mother in the front row, felt her jaw tighten at his smooth words. Loretta May touched her arm gently, a reminder to stay steady. When Alicia Warren took the podium, her journalist's training showed in every precise word. She presented maps marking properties where anonymous complaints had appeared just before Milton Baines's offers. She showed timelines of code violations, pressure tactics, and suspiciously quick foreclosure proceedings. With each revelation, Baines's smile grew more brittle. "In the past 18 months," Alicia stated, 17 elderly homeowners in this district received citations following anonymous complaints. 15 of those properties were subsequently approached by Mr. Baines's company with offers well below market value. The pattern suggests coordinated targeting of vulnerable residents. The veterans' advocacy lawyers spoke next. Their presentation focused on the lien against Loretta May's house. They projected hospital records onto the chamber's screen, highlighting discrepancies in how the debt had been calculated and transferred. The original amount has been inflated by nearly 40% through improper fees, the lead attorney explained. Furthermore, crucial documentation required for valid transfer of medical debt is missing. This lien should be invalidated immediately. Milton Baines leaned to whisper to his lawyer, his confidence finally showing cracks. But when Loretta May Jackson rose to speak, the room fell into a deeper silence than any procedural argument had commanded. She walked to the podium slowly, her dignity as natural as breathing. Her faded dress was pressed clean, her gray hair neat beneath her church hat. She looked nothing like a woman about to change minds, and everything like someone who had earned the right to be heard. "I'm not here to tell sad stories," she began, her voice clear and steady. "Lord knows we've all got those, and mine's no sadder than most. I'm here to speak about what happens when we forget to see each other as people." She described Mrs. Whitfield down the street, choosing between heart medication and heating oil each winter. She spoke of veterans like Isaiah and Terrence, men who had served their country only to find themselves invisible when they came home broken. She painted a picture of elderly neighbors afraid to answer knocks at their doors, knowing each official letter might be the one that took their homes. "These houses you're so eager to acquire?" She looked directly at Milton Baines. "They're not just property. They're where children learned to walk, where families grieved their losses, where people held onto dignity even when the walls needed paint and the roof leaked. You can't measure that value in dollars." Her words filled the chamber like summer air, impossible to resist and harder to deny. Behind her, Nathaniel Price stood at parade rest, his presence a reminder of the honor her simple kindness had commanded. Isaiah and Terrence watched with quiet pride, living testimony to the difference one person's recognition could make. "We shouldn't need 300 uniforms in our yard or cameras in our faces before somebody notices we matter," Loretta May continued. "Dignity shouldn't require a viral moment. It should be as natural as breathing, as simple as feeding hungry people at your table." Evelyn watched her mother from the front row, tears sliding down her cheeks. She saw what the whole room was seeing. Not a poor widow fighting for her house, but a moral force that had been there all along, waiting to be recognized. The council members leaned forward in their seats. The reporters' pens moved frantically across paper. Even Milton Baines had lost his practiced smile, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "I'm asking you to do what's right," Loretta May concluded. "Not just for me, but for every person who ever stretched a meal to feed a neighbor, or kept their porch light on for somebody lost in the dark. We are not empty buildings waiting to be claimed. We are human beings. And it's time we were treated that way." The chamber erupted in murmured discussion as she returned to her seat. The council chairman called for an immediate vote on emergency protections for vulnerable homeowners and a suspension of all pending acquisitions by Milton Baines's company pending investigation. When the measure passed unanimously, Evelyn's fingers found her mother's and squeezed tight. The room rose in waves, first the neighbors, then the church members, finally everyone on their feet as applause filled the chamber. At the back, Nathaniel raised his hand in a crisp salute, honor recognizing honor once again. The morning sun painted Magnolia Street in honey gold light as music drifted through the air. The scent of fresh paint mingled with the aroma of biscuits, coffee, and slow-cooked beans. Long tables draped in white cloths stretched across the newly paved courtyard between Loretta May's restored home and the transformed annex building. Gone were the sagging gutters and worn shingles from Loretta May's house. The porch gleamed with fresh varnish, and her garden bloomed fuller than ever. But it was the former church annex that drew everyone's eyes this morning. Its red brick walls stood proud and clean, windows sparkling in the early light. A new sign above the door read, "The Jackson Table Community Center," in dignified letters, with "Welcome Home" written smaller beneath. "Just look at what the Lord can do," Deacon Samuel Reed said, standing beside Loretta May as they watched volunteers setting up for the grand opening. His eyes were misty behind his glasses. Inside the center's kitchen, Evelyn directed traffic with the same efficiency she'd once used in her nursing duties. "Those fruit platters go on the buffet tables outside," she called to a volunteer, "and make sure the coffee urns are full. We're expecting over 200 people this morning." She'd traded her medical scrubs for a crisp white shirt with the center's logo, but her practical nature remained unchanged. The only difference was the softness in her eyes when she looked at her mother, pride replacing the old worry. Isaiah Boone moved through the space like he'd been born to it, greeting early arrivals and directing them to services with natural grace. His weathered face had grown younger somehow, purpose erasing years of strain. In the pantry, Terence Holloway checked inventory with careful attention, his clipboard notations precise as military records. Both men wore name tags identifying them as staff members, their positions earned through merit rather than mercy. "The counseling offices are fully booked for next week," Isaiah reported to Loretta May, "and the job placement program already has 15 veterans registered." The center hummed with activity. One room held rows of clean showers and fresh towels. Another offered computers for job searches and resume writing. The community garden outback had raised beds at wheelchair height and benches in the shade. Every detail spoke of dignity, freely given. Alicia Warren moved through the space with her camera, but this time she wasn't documenting crisis or rescue. Her lens captured children helping to set tables, elderly neighbors arranging flowers, and veterans in pressed shirts preparing to serve rather than be served. This was what legacy looked like. Not a single moment of charity, but sustained transformation. "Miss Loretta May," called Andre Pike, now 13, and proud to be one of the center's youth volunteers. "The first buses from the veterans' shelter are pulling up." She nodded, watching as familiar faces from that cold night months ago stepped into the sunshine. They looked different now, cleaned up, many employed, some in their own apartments. They greeted her with the easy warmth of family, rather than the awkward gratitude of charity cases. A convoy of black SUVs arrived next. Nathaniel Price stepped out in civilian clothes, but the bearing of command still sat naturally on his shoulders. Behind him came dozens of the same men who had once filled Magnolia Street in uniform. Today, they wore suits or casual clothes, carrying covered dishes and gifts for the center's kitchen. "Permission to join the celebration, ma'am?" Nathaniel asked, with a familiar half-smile. "Since when do you need permission in this house?" Loretta May replied, pulling him into a quick hug. The courtyard filled steadily. Mrs. Dolores Whitfield sat in her best dress, serving lemonade. Milton Baines was notably absent, his company under investigation and his properties now subject to strict oversight. In his place, honest developers were working with the neighborhood association on responsible renovation plans that protected longtime residents. Church members mixed easily with veterans. Children darted between tables while their parents found job leads or health care referrals. Elderly neighbors who had once been afraid to ask for help now volunteered in the kitchen, their wisdom valued as much as their work. "Daddy would be so proud," Evelyn said softly, joining her mother on the porch. She fingered the small gold cross that had been Elijah's, now hanging at her throat. Both him and Uncle Daniel. Loretta May nodded, thinking of the photographs that held places of honor inside, Elijah Jackson in his service uniform, Daniel Jackson forever young in his. their sacrifice now supporting new kinds of service. The old challenge coin from that first night sat framed beside them, marking where one act of kindness had sparked a revolution of dignity. The sound of car doors closing drew their attention. A young woman in a threadbare coat stood uncertainly at the edge of the courtyard, 3 small children clinging to her skirt. The fear of judgment showed plain on her face, the same fear Loretta May had seen in countless eyes before. Without hesitation, Loretta May crossed the courtyard. Her steps were steady, her head high, her smile as natural as breathing. She had been afraid once, too, counting cans and hiding bills, but fear had no place at this table. She reached the young woman just as doubt seemed ready to turn her away. With the same grace that had fed 30 strangers on a cold night, Loretta May opened her arms and her heart. "Come on in, baby," she said warmly. "There's enough." I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.